Morning.
So, okay, we're recording. Okay, we're starting and recording. So, hi, my name is Edwin Rutch. I'm director of the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy and founder of the Empathy Tent. And this is our empathy circles, is an empathy circle, and our intention is to bridge the social and political divides. And that means we want each person to feel heard to their satisfaction, and to facilitate constructive dialogue, and for us to see our common humanity. And the intention we want also for these circles is to scale them up and to really spread them as widely as we can, have as many people do them. We're trying to get politicians also to take part and talk across the political divide. And I'd like to invite anyone that's watching this to, you can take part in these too. You can go to empathycircle.com, and there's information about how to take part, as well as we have trainings too to be a facilitator, because we'd really like to have you learn how to host these circles and facilitate them yourselves. So next, I guess we'll just start with personal introductions, as I mentioned, and just your name, where you're from, and maybe your political affiliation, how you lean left, right, or wherever. And like I mentioned, I'm Edwin Rutch. I'm in El Cerrito, California, which is near Berkeley in the Bay Area. And I would say politically, I'm in the empathy camp. I grew up on the right, moved to the left, and now I've moved to the empathic. So, Evan, would you be willing to go next?
Sure. My name is Evan, and I grew up in Long Island, New York. Grew up liberal, basically, and also kind of moving away or just more studying a needs-based approach, one that just cares for everyone's needs and kind of seeing that we all have the same needs, but they're just met in different ways, and kind of seeing how we can negotiate and balance everyone's happiness.
Okay, Carolina?
My name is Carolina Kubiak. I live in Poland, Central Europe. In Gdańsk, the city is on north of Poland, on the Baltic Sea. My point of view is quite left, radical left, with Gandhian methods, Gandhian means, Gandhian approach.
Okay, thanks. Bill? You're muted. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Bill Filler. I'm a retired special education teacher in Northern California. And I'm on the left, as I say, but it's complicated.
Okay, and your audio is a bit low. Is there some way you can raise your audio, get closer to the mic, or is there a setting for?
Usually it's okay.
It was very low. You can go into the, the settings, audio settings, maybe raise it as high as it was just very hard to hear.
Okay, I'll see what I can do.
Okay, so Matt?
All right, can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, very clearly.
First, let me apologize for my camera angle. My laptop has the camera on the bottom, so it's looking up at my face. Anyways, my name's Matt Feemster. I live in San Mateo, California. It's in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I met Edwin 2 weeks ago at the California State Republican Party convention.
Right.
Convention every couple times a year, I think. It was my first convention. Edwin was there, and we chatted at length, and so I wanted to follow up with him on that. And so here I am. I'm also a member of my local county Republican Party. It's called the Central Committee. So I'm a member of that as well, and I do work with them. And so that's that.
Well, so glad you're here, Matt. Following up, really see you again. Had a great conversation there at the convention. Yeah. I can see Carolina is very thrilled too that you're here. She's been wanting more people on the right.
Yeah, because we usually only left here, our liberals,
So, okay, then I'll give a little introduction of how we do the dialogue. So it's a structured dialogue. And in this process, one person will speak and they select who they're going to speak to. So for example, if I was speaking, I would speak perhaps to Bill, and I'll speak on the topic, which is about, what was our topic? The relationship and role of empathy, laws, policing, and punishment. But it can be anything that you want, anything that's really alive for you that, around politics, any concerns or fears or whatever about the current political situation. And so I would speak to Bill, and I'll speak, and he will reflect back what I've been saying, what his understanding is of what I was saying, and then so I will pause. He will reflect back, and then I will say some more, and then he will reflect back, and till I feel heard or 5 minutes is up. So we take turns, 5-minute turns. And then once I feel fully heard, I can say I feel fully heard or the time is up. And then it would be Bill's turn to talk, and he can select someone to speak to, for example, Evan, and he would speak to Evan, and Evan would reflect back his understanding of what Bill said until he feels heard. We just go around like that for the time allotted, which is 2 hours for this dialogue. And yeah, so that's basically the process. And Matt, you're the only one that hasn't done this, so you can. We'll go do a couple of us will model it, and then you can just observe how it works, and then someone will pick you. And in fact, yeah, so we can just get started. The best way is just to jump in, and I will actually start. Oh, Evan, would you be willing to keep time? Is that so? 5-minute rounds, and I will speak to Bill then. Just to.
Okay, I'm listening. How's my volume?
It's still a little low. Is there any way you can? Is there anything?
I did adjust the input, though. I don't know.
Can you use headphones with mic?
How's that?
Oh, that did something.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, cool.
Good. Okay.
Okay, so yeah, starting now. So I chose the topic because it was related to the Day of Empathy, and there was just a big event on March 5th called the Day of Empathy, and it was about criminal justice reform, and so that's why we have this topic about about laws and incarceration and so forth. So that's kind of how the topic came up.
Okay. So the genesis of picking this topic was your reaction to the Day of Empathy, and talking about over-incarceration, privatization of prisons and things like that, and those concerns.
Yeah, and this event, Day of Empathy, is organized by, one of the organizers of it is Van Jones, who's a person, a CNN commentator. He's more on the left. And he's been advocating for incarceration or criminal justice reform. So he organized this Day of Empathy, and it's really bipartisan. And it's been, they had about 60, 70 organizations, around the country, and the members went to their local state capitals and then talked to legislators about criminal justice reform, and really about bringing the incarceration rate down and stuff like that. Okay.
So the founder of this movement, or a main mover, is Van Jones, who's mostly on the left, but then also was very supportive of the bipartisan coalition to address this problem. And then on March 5th, they have a grassroots organization all over the country that went to the legislatures and tried to talk to lawmakers.
Yeah.
To cut, make some differences.
And it's very bipartisan because Trump had just recently signed the First Step Act, which has this intention of reducing the incarceration rate, and so it's been very bipartisan with support from the right and the left. And so I would say it's one of the current things, current political topics, or, that there is bipartisan support for, so which is, positive.
Mm-hmm. So you wanted to make sure that, that the point was made that this was bipartisan, that a lot of people on the right supported it, and then President Trump signed it. And so this is an area you think of fruitful dialogue.
Yeah, but we can talk about anything we want. So I think it's not a real hot topic. So anyone can feel free to, talk about whatever's, up for them.
Okay. This is something that has moved you, but you want to make sure that the rest of the people in the group feel that they have free range and that they can talk about whatever that really seems to be important to them at the moment.
Yeah, I feel fully heard. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. All right.
And your volume is still a little low. If there's anything you can do to up it as much as possible.
It's going back. I don't know how to do that.
It could be set automatic if there's like automatic audio.
I move it up and then it just goes back.
Is there like an automatic setting? It's like it says automatically adjust. So you take this.
Automatically adjusting down. So I don't quite know how to do it. It's beyond it's AI. What was it? Terminator. Skynet is taking control. All right. Well, can you hear me?
Yeah, you might have to just hold it up or something manually.
All right. Okay. Who
are you speaking to?
Carolina?
Okay, I'm listening.
Okay.
I have to remind everybody that I don't speak English very well, so I might have problem with that, but I'm trying.
Okay.
Do my best.
Well, in my work, that's exactly what I spent my career doing, is trying to keep young men and women who are disadvantaged in all ethnic groups away, where possible and appropriate, away from the criminal justice system. I can stop there.
So what I'm hearing you say, you're saying that you spend your whole professional life fighting with this system that put less people who are not have such advantages in life, to put them in a situation when they go to the prison. So your whole life was kind of, you were devoted to helping people not get there.
Right, and I wasn't fighting with the system. I was trying to use it appropriately. And so one of the crazy things that makes everything crazy is that we have some very good institutions and we have some very corrupt ones.
So you make some amends to what I said, that you didn't fight with the system. You rather tried to make it better, okay, to use the system better way. And you admit that there are different kinds of institutions, or even the same kind of institution, but some of them work properly and very well, and some of them are quite corrupt. Is it correct?
Yes, it is. Thanks. And also, research has shown that 80% conservatively of prisoners have a reading disability.
So now you're talking about some statistic, and you recall the statistics that says that 80% of prisoners have problems with literacy. Is it correct? Hello?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Yes, can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah,
yes, that was
your screen was froze.
Oh, okay. Sure. so that was the key of what we tried to do. I would say that we tried to improve our students' communication skills so they can effectively get their needs met verbally, not through physical violence.
Okay, so what I'm hearing, because you work in education system, you try to change this horrible statistics of 80% of illiterate people or having problem with reading, and you understand that as problems with communication, problems in communication and in communicating their needs, their will, their intention, whatever it is, to communicate to other people to get what they want in better way than violence.
Right. And our research was very immediate. If there was someone who physically acted out, we asked, what was the communicative intent? What did they want to communicate to us? And when we could figure that out, the violence went down.
So what I'm hearing, you saying that you work in kind of methods working on communication.
Right.
If there was any form of crime, you always asked what was the reason, what was the source of violence that wasn't kind of expressed in words, as I understand. And when those people who made the crime have the opportunity to express their needs, the violence was immediately take down, let's say. Okay.
And then just in finality, then that's why I like these listening circles, because I believe our whole society and culture needs these kinds of activities so that we can really hear each other. And I'm done.
So thanks to your professional experience, this professional experience led you to the empathy circle, because you believe that the very same method you can use in the whole society in general to make social relations better than they are.
Thank you. That was very good. I feel fully heard. Thank you very much.
Thank you. To let Matt learn more about the structure, I will talk to Ivan maybe. Can you reflect?
Yeah.
Well, I had a problem with joining today's call because I saw that we talk again about incarceration and punishment, and prison system and justice system, and I said, oh God, again, third week we talk about the same. So I'm happy that Edwin let us talk about other topics as well. I stopped there.
Yeah, so you're feeling conflicted about joining today's call to talk about the same topic again. So you're glad that Edwin encourages, the free range of topics.
Yeah, but I kind of, before the meeting, I was thinking, what can I talk about? And I decided still talk about this system a little bit at least. However, I feel all of us, well, maybe Matt is an expert, I don't know, but most of us are not experts. Well, Will is an expert, for sure, but I'm not an expert in this topic, so I can make only kind of general statements.
Okay, so before the call, you thought, well, actually, that you do want to talk more about this and maybe do multiple topics, and then you're also wary because you think most of us are not experts on the topic, so we can only make kind of general theories about it.
Yeah, and what is important for me, well, maybe this way, I start different way. United States, your political system is something that frightens me, truly. I'm from Europe, and God, I don't want to live in such state. I don't mean country, because maybe your country, I think your country is beautiful, but the political system kind of frightens me, especially, for example, such thing like a private prison. That's something horrible, I think.
Yeah, so you're saying how the United States government is scary to you, and you think the country is beautiful, but the government itself is kind of scary, um, and you know the idea of private prisons is terrible.
Well, I wouldn't say American government. I would rather say that the whole system, state system, political system, okay? Because, government is something more personal. It depends on, well, the policy of every government or president is different, because some personal approach. So what I meant was political system in general.
Okay, so you want to make a correction there, and you mean not the United States government, but the more just the political system in general.
Okay. And for example, what is important for me, and it's more European tradition, is this approach where some social services or citizen services, or in general state services like education, healthcare, social system, including retirement system, those are not commodities for us. Those are kind of citizen rights, even civil rights, I would say, or human rights. Okay, we are on the level of development and civilization when we don't live in stone age. Okay, we can afford for treating those services, which I said, as a kind of human right or civil right.
So you're saying how being in a European country, and Poland in particular, you have more institutionalized, things like healthcare and education, and you're saying how it's, that as a developed country, you can afford these things. It's not the Stone Age, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Well, I mean that those services like education, healthcare system, retirement, and social care. Okay, I see. Thank you. Uh, should be should be given to us for free, and the same thing refers to prison and justice system. It shouldn't be commercialized in any way. Or army, the same thing. You can't commercialize some army services. That's what happens.
So the things that we see as kind of the basic human rights, like justice system and healthcare, they should just be institutional and not commercialized.
Yeah, thank you. I feel fully heard.
Okay, great. All right, shall we bring it back to Matt? Or bring it to Matt, rather. You are muted.
Am I the last one?
Well, it's just going to keep going around. We're going to keep passing it around. So at this point, I'm just asking if you'll, listen to me.
If I'll listen to you. Okay, sure.
Yeah, so I'll just start talking, and then you just kind of reflect back what I'm saying. Kind of like, is this what you're saying? You're saying this, that sort of thing.
Okay, sure.
All right. So I agree with a lot of what Carolina said. I also think I also dislike the idea of commercializing healthcare, education, justice system. I feel weird calling it justice system. It makes me feel like superheroes are saving us from bad guys. But I just think the world is in pain. So it feels weird to call it the justice system. Maybe I'll just pause there so you can get a chance to reflect that.
So I guess since I'm my first time doing this, like I guess my question would be a little the lines of clarifying. Are you, when you say commercializing, are you talking about every single person that works within that entity must be a government employee? Nobody can be a contractor, or there shouldn't be a profit motive? Like, I guess zero in on that.
I think you're responding to to what I'm saying with a question.
Okay.
The idea of the listening is just to reflect back what I said. Is basically just to repeat what I said. So you said X, and then when it's your turn, then I think you can use your turn as a response, or you can talk about something else.
Okay. So I guess I would say I'm hearing you say that you don't believe there should be a commercial aspect or perhaps a profit various public functions.
Right.
Such as specifically, I think you said justice and or administration of justice, and what was the other one?
Healthcare and education.
Okay.
Yeah. And then there was also just one other little point that I feel weird about using the word justice because. Sorry. Yeah, you can go ahead.
You believe that there is, I guess, enough wrong or enough bad going on within the justice system that it doesn't really meet the bar or raise to the level of actual justice.
It's not. I wasn't really commenting on any sort of corruption. That's a separate thing. That sure. But I was really just saying the word justice feels weird to me because, for me, that word paints a picture of good guys saving people from bad guys.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel more that the situation, my theory is that the world is just in pain, and so people, act out violently because they're in pain and their needs are not getting met. In a broad sense.
Okay.
So if you can reflect that piece back, and then I can move on to something else. So I should be timing myself.
Yeah. You feel that perhaps you feel that people are not necessarily the characterization that they're bad and good people are saving us from their badness is not necessarily the case. Rather, the people have perhaps some type of pain or something else going on that causes them to act out badly.
Right. Essentially, yeah.
And you're saying that justice is not really a good description for that.
I wouldn't.
Not a good term.
I'm trying to use my language not to say whether something is good or bad. So what I said was I dislike it. I dislike that word.
Okay.
I guess I'll just maybe make one or maybe a couple of other small points just to wrap this up, which is I guess I'll just add one brief little point on top of that, which is that we at least have a link between income and incarceration. So if you have less if you grow up or if you have less income over the span of your life, then you're more likely to fall in the incarceration rate, or sort of into that statistic. So I think that does make the case that suggests that people who are more likely to be struggling, are more likely to commit crimes eventually.
Okay, you're saying, kind of going back to the environmental thing, you're saying the causal factor is more of like environment, particularly with regard to income levels, as causal perhaps rather than like an intrinsic criminal mind or whatever type of thing.
Yeah, essentially. Thank you. I feel fully heard.
Okay.
So now it's your turn to select someone.
I would select Carolina,
Okay, I hope I managed to reflect you properly.
Okay. So I guess mine is, so am I allowed to phrase mine as a response to something to someone said? Or
You can say anything you want. You have total freedom to say whatever you want.
okay. So I guess mine would sort of be, I guess, a response to a few of the things you mentioned, just because it's something that seems like I hear or read online often. And it's regard to comments about, various social systems and so on, particularly in the United States.
So let me reflect. Can you
Okay.
stop there?
Yeah.
So you want to refer to what I was saying earlier, because it's something that you hear very often about the social political system in the United States, and I suppose you disagree with my view, so you can't want to respond to that.
Yeah, or I wanted to provide more data, more clarity and context.
And you want to make it more specific with more data, not just general theory, as I understand you.
Yeah. And this is a little bit off the path of particularly criminal justice. It's, I guess, more broadly social service type things.
Okay, so you don't want to talk just about just the topic of today's meeting. You want to make more broadly general comments.
Yeah, about these things. So first I want to say, with regard to things like publicly funded social services, whether we have a program here called food stamps. People can get free food, publicly funded houses. People can get like a subsidy on their rent. Publicly funded health care. There's a number of programs. Is my point I wanted to make is it's not as if we don't do those things. Admittedly, there is much debate on the proper amount of money to be spent on them. It's not as if they don't exist. They're actually quite large, and both in absolute terms, because we're a big country, but also as a percentage basis. And so I wanted to give just a little bit.
Can you stop there?
Data. Yeah.
I'm afraid I'm losing single words. I don't know why it happens, but some words just disappear. But I hope I can reflect. I still can reflect. So you are saying that that actually there is a lot of publicly funded programs, social programs that help people getting food, getting shelter, and healthcare, and it doesn't look like many people think. I assume you think I'm one of those people who think that there is no any social help in United States.
Yes.
And you want to put more details into it.
Yes. And sorry, I'm not running. You got it. I'm not running my timer. So tell me when my 5 minutes is up, Edwin.
Evan's tracking it.
Okay. Okay.
You've still got another minute and a half.
Okay. So anyways, I wanted to give a few quick facts and figures. As you know, our country has roughly 3 levels sort of government. You have federal, you have state, and you have local, which is like a city.
So the system in the United States has 3 levels, governmental, federal, and state?
And then local.
State. Local, okay. So federal, state, and local. Okay.
And so if you take start at the federal level, if you look at the amount of money that the U.S. government spends every year, it's up to around, it's now past $4 trillion per year. It's a huge number.
So you're saying that on the federal level, it's I'm not sure, 5 trillion?
Four.
Four trillion
Per year.
dollar per year. So it's a huge amount of money put in this health system generally.
Or no, I mean that's total, and I'm saying out of that total, around 3/4 of it is social spending through Social Security, Medicare, which is medical insurance for elderly people, Medicaid, which is health insurance for low-income people, CHIP, Children's Health Insurance, which is health insurance for kids, food stamps, which is free food, and subsidized housing. About 3/4 of everything the federal government spends each year is actually on social spending. So it's a very big number. So that my 5 minutes is up. Thank you.
I'm afraid I can't say all those
it's okay.
branches because it's too much for me. But the most important thing probably is that 3/4 of the whole amount you mentioned is put in the healthcare system, helping retired people, and so on and so on. So it's a huge amount of money put in kind of social aid, social help for people in need.
Yes, that was my point. I feel heard.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now it's my turn. Maybe I choose, now I see Jyoti, because last time it was Paramiyati, I suppose, yeah?
Jyoti here.
Hi.
Hi.
So I will talk to you, Jyoti.
Okay.
I didn't think much about what I would say next, but what is important to me that the prison system and justice system for me has kind of two levels of violence. I see two levels of violence in this system. I stop there.
So you haven't given a lot of thought to what you want to say, but what's really alive and present right now and seems to live in you is a big concern about the prison system, and you divide there's two levels of violence there, you see.
Yeah, so well, I use the word level. I don't know how to describe it better, but what I mean is that that there is a kind of general feature in this system. It's kind of structural violence that, well, the system is derived somehow from, let's say, Hammurabi Code, eye for an eye. If you do something bad, the same will happen to you. It's kind of that kind of approach.
So the foundation of the whole system is based on violence.
Yeah, and what is important, it is the rule that I see in Hammurabi Code. I suppose you use the Hammurabi name. Yeah. And this is the rule eye for eye.
Yeah, so you see that playing out in this prison system is just eye for an eye. System that just kind of runs the whole. So that's the foundation of the prison system.
Yeah, and obviously it's more sophisticated now. It's not that simple, but still in general, on kind of meta level, it's the same. Okay, if somebody do something bad, we treat him or her bad. That's the main rule. That's the main idea. You did something, we give you the same. And this is one level of this system. Another one is that we use we just cast people who commit crimes. We just cast them out from the society. We send them into kind of banishment.
Right. So there's if someone hurts another or hurts society, then we hurt them back, and then we banish them and isolate them from society.
Yeah, and it's a particular form of violence. And it's a form of violence that produces violence, because those people, I said that before on the former meetings, we kind of put all the people in the one place. It's very condensed place of very condensed violence, and they actually learn how to be violent more than they were before.
So once they do something that's violent, then they are sent to a place where they learn more.
Yeah, and I read lately kind of poll or statistics about imprisonment in Poland, and people who were incarcerated, the thing they felt lack the most was their family, their private family relations. They felt kind of abandoned, and that was something they missed the most.
So you did some research and found that the prisoners had most pain about their disconnection from their families.
Yeah, and I think it's a horrible violence to do that to somebody, and actually it somehow make it impossible to be again fully a member of society. That's how I feel it.
So you see that kind of punishment is beyond the pale. It's just really deeply disturbing for you.
Yeah, I feel hurt. Thank you.
I looked at some of the documents.
So first thing is if you select who you're speaking to.
Okay. I'll speak to you, Edwin.
Okay.
I looked at the documents sent, and I didn't see my name on the list to put my answers in, so I'll figure that out. But when I looked at the questions, I had something I could have put in there, but since I came in late, I don't know what we're addressing now.
So yeah, you're not, since you came in late, you're not sure what the topic is, and it's really whatever is alive for you, just whatever you have energy around.
When I looked at the documents, I was looking at my experience about listening, and just
I think you think this is maybe the training, the facilitator training, but this is actually just the empathy circle. Just wanted to.
Oh, okay. Okay, I do have it confused. All right. So
yeah, this one was about just criminal justice and incarceration, but you can talk about anything that's alive for you. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, I did some volunteer work at our prison here over the course of a couple years, and I was going in with the trainer who was teaching nonviolent communication, and I just learned a tremendous amount.
Okay, so you're actually been volunteering in a prison, and you've been doing some nonviolent communication work there, and you've been learning a lot.
Yeah, and it was very sad and scary in some ways, and I saw some people that were able to turn themselves around through the system amazingly.
Mm-hmm. So just being there, you have a sense of sadness, and sounds like a bit of fear too, just being there. But you were seeing people that had turned their lives around, and so it sounds like maybe celebrating that. Or
yeah, some people were able to do that. And I find that listening is often very difficult. Where I run into the most difficulty is needing empathy myself. And when my empathy bucket is empty, it's very hard for me to stay present with someone else.
mm-hmm. So you're just noticing in yourself in terms of empathizing with others that you need to sort of be filled. Metaphorically, you have like an empathy bucket, and when that's empty, it's hard to listen to others when you haven't been heard.
Right. And I spend a lot of my time probably unnecessarily in an empathy deficit, and I kind of flounder around, kind of some part of me knows that it's out there available, and another part of me is like, I can't quite grab onto it and engage and hang on and get the empathy that I need. There's also some kind of trust stuff about, oh, my stuff is so hard to understand that nobody could really get it.
So you're really saying that you have an empathy, your empathy, you have your own deficit of empathy, or that you're needing empathy, and it's hard to actually find a way to get it, because and sort of one of the criticisms of yourself is, oh, my problems are so big or so complicated, people just wouldn't understand me.
Yeah, and most especially with my family, where my family desperately needs empathy from me, and I desperately need to be heard by them. And I even took a MVC trainer down there just to, observe the dynamics. And she just said, don't try it. Don't even go there. She said, you can call me. Why do you have to be heard by them? You can be heard. It doesn't have to be by them. And so some part of me that this just really has a hard time letting go of that particular person being the one that hears me.
Mm-hmm. So you have this need for empathy, for meaning to be heard and understood and to express yourself, and you would like that from your family, but they're kind of needing empathy from you. They're needing to be heard and understood by you, and so it's just sort of a struggle. And someone said, oh, you can come to me for empathy, but you're really wanting to be heard by your family.
Yeah, and there's a core foundational thing here where I ended up being the listener and the sacrificer, and everybody else was, the center of attention. I was invisible, and so it's connected to that desperate, abandoned little kid in me. So that's what it's connected to.
Mm-hmm. So it's like in the family, you're the listener, you're the one, but you don't get seen. And there's sort of this desperation, a feeling of desperation that you want to be seen and acknowledged in your family.
Yeah, there's lots of consequences that I've experienced because of that, being invisible. Lots of consequences. So there's a lot of desperate pain around it. Yes, you're right. You got it. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you're feeling a lot of pain. There's a lot of desperation about being seen and heard and acknowledged in your family, and it affects you in your life in general.
Yes, okay. I mean, there's lots of things that happen because nobody was present.
Yeah, so it had consequences that your family wasn't present to see you and hear you.
Right.
And that was 5 minutes too.
Yep.
Okay, then I'll speak to Matt.
Okay, I'm unmuting myself. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, first thing is I'm so glad you're here. Sort of celebrating your presence here, that all the work we did going to the Republican convention, somebody reached out and took initiative. I haven't followed up with everyone. I'm so glad that, it meant enough to you to sort of reach out. So very appreciative of your presence and reaching out.
Okay, so yeah, so you're happy I'm here. You're happy that I followed back up after we chatted at the convention. You're happy that I reached back out to you, even though you didn't have enough time to get back to everyone from the convention
yet. And I'm hoping that we can continue the dialogue, since you're part of the central committee there in your area. We can invite more Republicans to take part in these circles and create more dialogue between the left and right, or even within the Republican and within the Democrats. That they can have their own circles with each other, because there's plenty of internal conflicts and issues within. You smile. Yeah, so there can be. This is helpful not just across the political divide, but within. Political between the sides, and yeah, so.
Yeah, you're happy that I'm here to provide, I guess, another viewpoint. You were perhaps hoping to hope that more such people would join, but you also noted that even outside, even not just between the two umbrellas here in American politics, but for even within those umbrellas, there's a fair amount of, shall we put it nicely, debate.
Yeah, debate, and putting it in conflict, to put it a little bit more specific, and dysfunction.
Yep.
If you just reflect that back, the part about.
Okay, yeah. You were noting that even within the umbrellas, there's a fair amount of dysfunction and conflict. And I believe you were saying that you think an empathy type listening could be helpful within them.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And so for me, since we were talking about criminal justice and, what Carolina was saying about retribution, it being punitive justice system, for me, that prison would be about empathy training. It's like you go there and it's like an intensive empathy training, how you learn to become more empathic. And I would love to see each person coming out of prison as a highly skilled empathy trainer.
You're saying that you think empathy could be, I guess, more helpful, or empathy training or teaching could be more helpful or desirable within prisons rather than just, the pain or retribution of being.
Exactly.
I guess, I think you're saying it would lead to, or what you think is a better outcome.
Right. If people would come out, when someone does a crime, if they, steal, rape, murder, those are the really extreme ones, but there's all kinds of other crimes. There's the sense of lack of empathy, right? They're not thinking of the consequence. When somebody steals my car, they're not thinking about how it upsets me that my car's not there, which has happened. And that's like a lack of empathy. So for me, crime is in a sense a lack of empathy for the people it's impacting. So, yeah, so that's for me what crime is in general, is a lack of empathy.
And so, so you're saying when someone commits a crime, they're generally coming from a position of not caring about, not having empathy for the victim. And so if you teach them, bring them face to face with the effect that it has on the victim, I guess in prison,
yeah,
they could perhaps come to feel more for their victims and would thus make them think twice about doing that type of thing again?
Yeah, that would be part of it. That could be sort of restorative practice. The other is that within the population, it would be like empathy circles because they're relating, it's whoever you're relating to. You know, you want to have empathy not just for the people you affected, but for the people you're relating to, or the other prisoners. So they could be having empathy circles there as well among each other and be learning to deepen, to talk about their issues in their lives and the lives of others in the prison too. So it'd be creating an empathic culture within the prison.
Okay, so you're saying that spreading empathy culture within a prison is not only helpful for helping prisoners to see their effect on victims, but it's helpful within the prison in how they relate to other prisoners.
Yeah, and that they could take these skills home to their families, like Jyoti is talking about, right? I mean, she's a functioning, law-abiding citizen, but she's got these issues with her family, like most of us do, I do, right? In terms of, constructive relationships. So they can take these skills home and actually, foster more constructive family relationships too. So it's really multifaceted in any relationship. These skills and mindsets can be used to create more effective connection and communication.
Okay, you're speaking broadly to the benefit of it, not just in the context of a prison system, but in society in general. As you mentioned, Jyoti sounds like her family could or would benefit from such a thing as well. So you use that as an example that it's applicable society-wide, but I think you're saying from a prison perspective, for someone who is in prison, it could start there, and then if they were to get out someday, they can those ideas and teachings to their family and to their community.
Yeah, so that's what I'm really hoping in this discussion, that the Day of Empathy was about, this event was about having society be aware of the effects that it's having on prisoners, which is, having empathy for them is good to see the impact on their lives. But it's also that prisoners or people incarcerated are having, learning to have empathy for the larger society as well. So it's I think I'm advocating for a whole societal shift to moving to greater empathy between all in all the relationships. Yeah.
Okay. I think in summary, you touched again on the usefulness of it more broadly. You're saying that it's, in addition to being helpful within someone who's in prison, it could be broadly helpful throughout society as well, in obviously a number of areas or between a number of competing groups.
Yeah, any relationships,
family, whatever.
Yeah, so I'm an empathy evangelist. So if you just reflect that last part, I'll be heard.
All right, yeah, you're an empathy evangelist. This is what you're trying to promote. This is
right,
and it appears to me that you genuinely believe in its usefulness, its utility, and how that it can indeed help.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Okay. Now, do I go or does
you just select who you want to speak to, and you've got 5 minutes?
I guess William, since he's William J. Filler.
Yeah, gotcha.
All right, it's 11:04. I guess I want to say that I kind of get the feeling that there's perhaps I get the feeling we ought to be more specific about the chain of events where the thing I think you talked about was that you try to do some type of social intervention, early on, or as others have said, does the person have a hard time reading? Do they have a lack of money? Do they live in a not so good part of town? Intervene early on, which is presumably a good thing. contrasting that with what do you do when that doesn't work and the person still goes out and rapes somebody? You know, if not prison, then what else?
Okay. So you were looking at the kind of chain of events that leads to prison. And you were talking about the preconditions that predispose someone to go, like, for instance, I mentioned the lack of being able to read effectively and things like that. But when those interventions fail, and then someone still, crosses the line, then into crime, then what else besides prison would there? What would be the alternative when you have what I hear is you have a very clear need to basically put some limits and containment on that person so that the rest of the society is not harmed?
Yeah, exactly. And so I guess my point is kind of, I guess in terms of my opinion on it, I'm say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. No matter what a problem is, it's always better to prevent it ahead of time than wait till after the fact to try to clean up the mess. That's, obviously desirable in pretty much every situation, but prevention does not does not solve 100% of cases. I don't know what your success rate is, but I'm guessing it's not 100%. And so, when you get into the situation of people do bad things, some are horribly bad. You look at the famous ones throughout history. You look at Jeffrey Dahmer, right? He was a cannibal. I think we need to be realistic and confront the reality that there will always be some probably pretty large number of people who do horrifically bad things, and be realistic about how do you keep them away from other people so that they don't keep doing it again.
Okay. So at the beginning of what you said, you're very supportive of proactive measures. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. But then going down the line, it's hard for you to really see, in other words, to square the need to protect society from a dangerous individual or one who would prey upon somebody and hurt other people. And they're, well, that's what I heard. You need to, basically have an effective control on them. I feel that you said a lot and I'm missing something else. So, please correct me.
I was just saying, acknowledging the fact that you're not going to catch 100% of cases. And what do you do?
Right.
Prison is the final solution or result, like the last stop on that path if nothing else works. I guess that's what I was saying.
Right. So you kind of see that, essentially dealing with, you're not going to solve 100% of the, through proactive means. You can't address 100% of the problem. There will be, and you consider it, a large amount of people who will then go on to be a considerable danger to themselves or others. And so therefore, how do you deal with that group who are so clearly harmful to the rest of the society?
Yeah. Yep, you got it. You have a minute left, Edwin? About?
I've got 30 seconds on my clock.
30 seconds. So last thing is I want to wrap up. From what I see, a lot of the delegitimization of the justice system, people's negative views of it, I really think took a downward turn maybe 50 years ago with the introduction of the war on drugs, because, at least in America, because that kind of took it from focusing on crimes where someone is directly harming another person to sort of a gray area where maybe you're harming yourself or maybe you're selling drugs and it's kind of harming society. And I think that's where a lot of the delegitimization of it and criticism came from, that made people start to question, is you're throwing tons of people in jail who have not directly gone out and committed violence against someone. I'll leave it there.
Okay. So you're seeing that the of societal distrust that the justice system may have started back in the time of the war on drugs, where essentially victimless crimes, or sort of a gray area, you said, people weren't actually going out and hurting other people. It may not be pleasant, maybe nice, but vast amounts of people were thrown in jail, and that this created this distrust.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I think that's perhaps where it started, and it's kind of snowballed from there.
Okay, so that's where it started. Then you can expand.
I feel heard. Thank you.
Sure, thanks. All right, I'll talk to Evan.
All right.
Okay. Well, first of all, I also want to appreciate Matt for being here. And I really appreciate Matt's use of like facts and figures and things like that. I might dispute them and things like that, but I really feel that that's a basis for discussion. And that feels, that feels good to me. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, so you appreciate Matt being here and his use of facts and figures, and you might throw in some wrenches in his arguments maybe, or try and but you're just kind of appreciative.
Right. So first of all, I want to agree with Matt said an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I've seen that. But one of the problems is that we lose quality control on what are effective methods.
Okay, so you're saying how you agree about prevention being, really valuable, and but you're worried about losing quality control.
Yeah. Yes. Well, let me explain. So to answer Matt, I dealt with very challenged students, not emotionally challenged students. So they were removed from 3 classes before they got to mine. Okay. So I'll stop there.
So you were working with kids that have already been taken out of 3 other classes because of all the problems that were going on with them.
Or returning from a hospitalization. Okay. And my success rate, as I measured my success rate, and Matt's absolutely right, there's not 100%, was 80%. And when I judged it, was 80%. I want to keep them out of more restrictive setting, out of jail, out of residential, keep them in their homes, okay? And also make them, and then at the very least, keep them not, needing more restrictive services than I had, okay?
So you were saying how you measure your success rate as 80%, and you're kind of defining the goal as just to keep them in their homes and away from a more restrictive environment. Right.
And it wasn't just simply that low. I mean, I had other students who were able to reintegrate into a regular ed, system. But some, for instance, who were on the autistic spectrum needed help because of organicity that, they'd always need some help.
Okay, so you even had some kids that were able to get out of your class and back into the regular education programs, and then you had on the other end of the spectrum some kids that just couldn't really make progress.
No, they could make progress, but they're organic, like in autism. Okay, their deficits were such they were biological. And so they needed a certain amount of help, but with that help, they could be maintained in less restrictive, freer, and also cheaper environments.
Okay, so even the adults with, specific developmental challenges, could be still sort of maintaining, their freedom by, continually working with you in the program.
Mm-hmm. And so I think that we need to robustly, I'm sorry. So the point I want to make about efficacy is that there was basically a private school who was doing what we were doing on the cheap. This was in the news. What was it called? It was in Antioch, and I'm forgetting the name of their program. But essentially, their people were being paid less than $10 an hour, no vacations, and they were being thrown in with these intense students. And then when one person, poorly trained, under a lot of stress, hit a student, that made TV. Whereas our program was very, very different, didn't use any of that, and yet they're seen as the same. Thank you. Then I'm done.
Okay, so you basically encountered a different school where they tried to do a version of what you guys were doing, but they didn't really put enough resources into it. So you had, poorly trained workers in this really stressful environment, and when they would actually, just lose it and abuse a child or an adult, then they'd end up on the news, and you're saying that would affect your
pursuit. Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And no nuance as to what a good program or a bad program would do.
So people just couldn't even discern then between the good programs and the bad programs.
Thanks, Evan. I feel hurt.
Sure. Okay. I will bring it back to Jyoti.
Hello?
Hello. Let me just reset the timer here on myself. Okay. Yeah, so I'd like to, well, first let me also say I'm appreciative of Matt being here and, having someone more on the right. So let me just take a second to second that. And then also would like to respond to some of what he was saying about really just the question, I guess it was, when you can't prevent, everything, obviously, what are alternative solutions? So maybe I'll just pause there as sort of my introduction.
So you're really appreciative that Matt's here, and you're wanting to look at what he put forward about what are alternative solutions when things kind of fall apart.
Yeah. I guess I'm also a little confused because, we don't know. I mean, what is prevention? Prevention, I'm not even sure how we're using that word. If we prevent something, then we don't really know about it because it didn't happen. I guess, something that we do measure is kind of, the rate at which people return to prison. And we could certainly, work, if society can work to reduce that, I guess you could, categorize that under prevention. Maybe I'll pause there.
So I think I'm maybe, what you're talking about at the rate of which people return to prison. And
yeah, I guess I'm just confused about the way we're using prevention, and I'm suggesting that maybe that could be a way to use prevention, but I'm not really sure that that's what we're talking about.
So that could be one way to measure prevention, but you're kind of contemplating, how do we measure prevention?
I'd like to shift away from that. Matt also brought up that there are some criminals that, just seem to be beyond rehabilitation, which I think is really what the left is often pushing for. And it sounds like the right too. I mean, based on what Edwin's saying about this Day of Empathy and how it was received. But I think that's typically what the left is pushing for, more resources into rehabilitation, whereas, the current criminal justice system is kind of seen as a Band-Aid on a struggling, working class issue or lower income issue, in statistically.
So you're talking about the left and the right having something in common about how to go about doing rehabilitation. Am I getting you?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just saying, rehabilitation is basically what the left is typically, from my sense, is what they're pushing for to make the criminal justice system less punishing and more, transforming.
So you're just establishing that the left is wanting the justice system to be more corrective than punitive.
Right. And I think, of course we can, look at the, the worst examples of criminals in history, but I think if you look at prison, you'll probably end up with a sort of a pyramid where, you've got, the absolutely criminally insane people that will, whereas, if we could offer, everyone, the chance to rehabilitate and progress checking measures, great. But, even if the people at the top of that pyramid, don't rehabilitate, we've still got, the rest of the pyramid, whereas a lot of these people are just people that grew up without money, struggled, some people will call it mental health. I call it just a mental state, just whatever words you want to use. But there's still a whole bunch of people that, would probably do well, would have an easy time rehabilitating, much easier than the absolutely criminally insane, example at the top that, to me, is I don't even want to spend time on that. And then, of course, income, the preventative, the category that I was trying to define earlier, the preventative measure to me would be income equality, redistribution, some measure to help society rebalance income equality.
So you're looking at the prison population in a pyramid kind of organization, where at the very top would be like the criminally insane, and then the majority would be some in the bottom of the pyramid, and that measures to offer opportunity for rehabilitation and correction would most likely be a good investment and effective. And then you mentioned a second point about I'm kind of forgetting.
It's okay. I'm out of time anyways. I'll just add just 3 more words, which is just that the current system doesn't work very well because the rate at which people return to prison is pretty. I think it's not. I don't feel good about it.
So you don't feel good about the return rate, and so for you, that's evidence that whatever's happening in prison isn't being effective.
Right. What I was saying, basically, it's a Band-Aid approach,
Right.
And we need more resources into rehabilitation. That's basically just to sum it up. But thank you. I feel fully heard.
Okay. Let's see. William, did you hear me?
Gotcha.
Okay.
Volume, is it okay now?
Yep, it's good.
Okay.
When I heard Evan mention the return rate, the recidivism, that's what they call it, rate into prisons, I was just reminded of a study done by Antioch, which is a university here in the Seattle area, of the nonviolent communication program that we did in the prison. And I don't remember the statistics, the numbers, but it was a very impressive number that they came up with, that reduced the recidivism amongst the population who had the NVC training versus those who didn't.
Okay, so you were pointing out that in your area, I guess Antioch University did the study about recidivism, and they found that prisoners who had NVC training were much less likely to go to be recidivists as opposed to those who didn't.
Yes. When I heard that, it really caused me pause and made me more interested in continuing to participate in the program.
So once experiencing that sort of success and that result, it inspired you to continue in the program.
Right. And one of the things I learned while that really came into big focus for me about what brought people there was being steeped in a culture based on right and wrong, good and bad, punishments and rewards, rather than on a culture that where everybody had a community they belonged to, and everybody circled up on a regular basis, and everybody knew each other. Here we grow up in a culture where you lose all your friends every year, and you go to another grade, and you have a different teacher and possibly a lot of different people in your class, instead of like a lot of European countries where they are with the same kids, the same teachers for many years, and they don't lose their community.
Mm-hmm. So you were looking at, as opposed to that, many of the characteristics, I guess the societal effects of looking at things in very stark black and white terms and labeling, basically very quickly ostracizes people from their community. Whereas in European countries, they have cohorts where the students and the teachers stay together, they develop a community and a sense of belonging, and that helps to reduce the incarceration rate.
Right. And I've heard also about places in California, I don't know the names of the places, where they started to institute what they call just circles, where people would come to, the kids would belong to a circle, and they all got together, and they just learned a few of these basic skills, and the problems that were happening reduced dramatically, because these kids were growing up in families, had tremendous problems, and nobody to talk to. So when they had these circles, then they were able to be transparent and accepted and heard and supported. So it comes down to the whole fabric of the society being rewoven at the foundation.
Okay. So you're saying that you weren't quite sure in California, they had a kind of circle talk, and as a result that kids felt heard, part of a community, and social problems reduced dramatically.
A lot, right. So a lot of these kids are out there trying to navigate with tremendous stresses and trying to do the best they can on their own. And this is where, they get into gangs and drugs, and, they're vulnerable to whatever's out there. So if whatever's out there is another thing that's available is a circle of support, then you're gonna meet a huge need that's out there.
So you're looking at the need, and a lot of the gang membership is fueled by a deep need for the individual for belonging. And then if they're offered the alternative of joining a circle and the group members there, that'll be much preferable.
Yes. But not just in the area of gang stuff, but it's a place where they can learn how to conflict resolution. They can learn that. They can learn how to figure out other ways to get their needs met. Like maybe they need money, and so instead of selling drugs or whatever, they can find a community of people who can work with them to find ways to make money. Or there's just a lot of strategizing that they never learn how to do about how to get their needs met. So they'll make a choice because they don't see the other choices available.
Okay. So again, the participation in the circles make other ways to get their needs met, and more pro-social ways, transparent and easy. And so therefore they would choose that as opposed to the more dysfunctional ways like committing crimes or doing drugs.
Right. I think people who grow up with resources and built-in communities where they belong to a baseball team or this club or that club because their families can afford it, just have blinders on about what it is to be in the world with zero resources and taking whatever's in your immediate environment as your resource, which aren't helpful.
Okay. So some people who have more money and can put their kids into many activities and, and so make sure that their kids are joining and participating, they're kind of insensitive, or they have blinders to the needs of other parents of less means who can't give those opportunities to the kids.
Yeah. So one way to...
That was 5.
Okay.
Okay. Did you want to say a few words just to sum up for a second?
Thanks for hearing me. Yeah, I just see that the fabric of how we are as communities is the foundation of what disables or doesn't enable its citizens.
Okay. So basically you're talking about how the mores of our current society don't necessarily, encourage pro-social activity from our members.
Right.
Okay. All right. All right, I'll go back to Carolina.
Okay, I'm listening.
Okay. So I've heard, a lot of things. Certainly, I think it's made me think about the issue from various perspectives, and I'm appreciative of that. So I'll stop there.
So you're saying that you hear many different perspectives, and you appreciate this multi kind of many plural views on the topic.
Right, right. I think, and overall, I've dealt with individuals. Again, I don't want to stigmatize kids or anybody. What I told my kids is that they were all heroes because they were children dealing with adult problems.
So you're saying that during your professional work, you were dealing with individuals and everyone with whom you were working, you were saying that they are, for you, they are heroes.
Right, because they're kids having to deal with adult problems.
Oh, so you meant by saying that, by hero, the fact that they were just kids, but they had to deal with adults' problems. So it was particularly difficult for them. Right.
But because of the nature of the severity, I did have very, very violent individuals.
And you saying that the problems you were dealing with were very severe, and the situation you were dealing were very severe, very heavy, and dealing with those problems were kind of huge problem to you. Is it correct?
Well, it would be for anyone. But what I was saying is that, again, most of the kids and most of the population were nonviolent. I'd say 80 to 90%. But that one or two, I had about 10 kids in my class, so one or two kids that were very intense.
So you're saying that 80 to 90% of your classes were non-violent, but this one or two kids in your class were heavily violent.
Yeah.
And dealing with those, as I understand what you said earlier, you mean that, do you mean that, they were heroic in dealing with those adults, so-called adults problems?
No, I felt that they all were heroic. I feel even the violent kids were put in a really disadvantaged thing. But when they acted out physically, that's not being heroic.
Okay, so you mean that you call them heroes, but you don't mean that dealing with their problems violently was heroic.
Right.
But the fact that they were kids facing adult problems was kind of putting them in a hero position.
Right. So again, in summation, as I see it, what's been suggested here, a much more robust and quality assured intervention program would reduce the number of incarcerations so that we could focus our attention, first of all, about stopping those very violent individuals and then giving them the time in a safe situation to hopefully improve. But if not, if it's me or them, I'm going with me. That's it.
I'm not sure what I hear in this part of what you're saying, but I'm not sure what you mean by quality ensuring.
Sure. The quality assurance refers to earlier when you have programs that are effective and not effective, but there's no way to look at them and to judge that.
It's hard to understand for me. Even I understand every word. I kind of can't get it. But what I'm hearing is that you think that changing kind of quality situation of their life would change their approach. Is it correct?
Well, I do think so. That wasn't, we're kind of into the weeds. I'm just saying is that if we could effectively and with means testing judge the effectiveness of the programs, put some more energy into it, then we would avoid a lot of programs, and that energy could be dealt with the more intense individuals.
Okay, so you're saying that, well, if I hear you correctly, you are saying that there is a lot of programs, but focusing on particular programs and abandoning the rest of them could give more effect. Is it correct?
Yes, and just really briefly, I'll say is that my assistant was a Republican, and she cared about the kids, and we were together a long time, very good, and she cared about the kids just as much as I did and was just as effective as I did at doing that, and that's the basis of humanity in which we need to go forward on.
So you're saying that your assistant in your professional life was Republican, so quite opposite to your political view, but you were cooperating very efficiently, and she cared as much as you cared about those kids. And so I assume you mean that political view have nothing to do with how we care about other people. That's, I assume you mean.
Well, secondary. Thank you. I feel very heard, Carolina. Thanks for sticking with me.
I'm sorry. I have some problems with understanding a part of what you were saying.
Now, many English speakers have problems with understanding me too. It's not you.
Okay. Well, I have a headache, so I have moments when it's quite difficult to focus on what you're saying for me. Okay. Okay, I have to choose who were talking the last. I'm not sure.
Maybe Matt.
Okay, so I will talk to Matt. let's try.
All right, I muted myself.
Okay. I don't want to say that I also appreciate your appearance here because it's become boring to say that. But I'm glad you put some figures into our talk, because I have this kind of funny impression that, oh, we left guys talking about ideas, and here you see you have conservative guy who speak about numbers. So I started to think about the numbers you mentioned, and I was a little bit shocked. I'm not sure because, okay, I stopped there.
Okay, you're glad to have me here, and you're glad that I brought up some numbers to give, I guess, context to what you're saying. And those numbers have caused, you were a bit shocked at the size of the numbers, I think.
Yeah.
That, I guess it gave you pause to, or gave you reason to think about them a little more.
Yeah, and I start to, when I have a little time to do that, I start to make some calculations, and I can't believe what I found, that it looks like if your population, American population, is more than 300 million people, that would mean that if you divide these numbers you mentioned by the number of population, it would give about $10,000 for one person per year. It's a huge amount of money, especially when we realize that not everybody need those money, and only part of your population have access to those money. So I'm curious if I do any mistake with the trillion number, because there are different traditions of understanding trillion. But it looks kind of strange. 10,000 per person a year. It's a lot of money, I think. Or, well, maybe my calculation is wrong, or there is something wrong with the system you were talking about, because there is a lot of poverty in your country.
Yep. So you're saying that you did a rough calculation of the numbers, and you took the total amount that I mentioned of federal social spending at about $3 billion per year, and divided it by the number of people, which is around 300 million, the size of the population, and come out with, and that gives you roughly $10,000 per person per year.
Yeah.
You said that, but because not everybody is accessing these funds, they may not need them, or they may not be retired yet, or whatever. Number may even be larger per person for those who are receiving it. And you are a little bit unsure because you're saying that you still see a lot of poverty still exists in this country. So you're a little bit unsure if those numbers are correct, because you're having trouble reconciling the fact that we do spend this money, yet there is still a lot of poverty. So something might not be adding up.
Yeah, but maybe it's I made a wrong calculation. So it was just my impression. And yeah, and another thing I wanted to say is that from today's meeting, I kind of get this idea. I got those ideas of, first, empathy, that the lack of empathy is kind of, well, it is a reason of increasing crime. Another thing, the communication as a method of resolving problems. And another thing, Jyoti mentioned that soft skills, kind of working on soft skills and giving the opportunity to develop personal soft skills can reduce the amount of crime. I stop there.
I think you were saying that you enjoyed talking with the group today because you saw the empathy, but it also, I may be wrong here, but convinced you of the notion that a lack of empathy and a lack of communication ability is definitely a source of a lot of crime and dysfunction.
Well, Edwin was talking about the lack of empathy. Bill was talking about the communication practice that gives the chance to resolve problem in non-violent way. And Jyoti was talking about something I would call soft skills, the opportunity to train, to practice kind of soft skills and to develop my relations with society. And I think those three things kind of give me give me better perspective on what we can do to change the situation, to decrease the crime in a society.
Okay, having heard the different perspectives of people in this group who have either worked in those areas or have experienced such things in their personal life, gives you a perspective of partly what the cause of the problems is, and also that the solutions lie in a better empathy, better soft skills, better communication, opportunity to help people flesh these things out. And if there was more of that, there would possibly or perhaps be less crime and dysfunction. And this group helped you kind of realize that better.
Yeah, thank you. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Okay.
You even better described what I meant than I did that. Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
one more round. Matt, you'll be the last person to speak before we break.
Okay. Geez, who do I want to speak? I guess I'll go to you, Edwin.
Okay, sure.
I guess so my I guess okay, so broadly I think a lot of great ideas, a lot of great discussion these days. But one, and this is just a broad view, bird's eye view of a lot of this and a lot of things. A direction that I find myself kind of going more and more these days is when someone brings up an idea, like a theory or philosophy or idea or whatever, I really place a lot more weight on if a person has an actually implementable, administrable, fundable, supportable, sustainable plan to actually do it rather than just philosophy.
And so you have great discussions, but one thing when people talk about sort of philosophy is you're really seeing that you're moving in the direction of really wanting sort of implementable, doable plans, and so that's just something, this direction that you're going.
Right. That's kind of like show me how you're going to do it, or else, you know. And so in the context of that, one thing I think is important for everyone to keep in mind, no matter what their view or what their idea is first assess what is already being done. So we have, like I said, we have tons of social programs. William mentioned finding out what works and which doesn't. We spend billions of dollars every year doing studies on, is it nutrition? Is it having a two-parent household? Is it air pollution or lead that's screwing up these kids' minds? You know, if we plant trees next to a school, does it help with pollution? It's not as if we do nothing. We do a lot. And I think at a first step, and he probably knows better than me, better than I do because he works in this field, is first assess, what are we doing so far?
So there's a lot of studies out there already, looking at different phenomenon, cultural stuff that's going on. But for you, what's really important is to see what is already being done and maybe what's already working, and kind of do an assessment of what's working.
And I will say that I don't fault anyone for not knowing, because there's so much, and it's often buried very deep on government websites that you probably never look at. Some obscure sub-agency of a sub-agency of a sub-bureau. It's buried in academic journals that really are only read by other academics. And so because of that, I think there's a lot of ignorance, and I don't use that word as a slur, but just meaning generally not knowing, because the data is so vast. It's buried in obscure places. You'll often hear people talk about a lot of things and not realize that we're already doing quite a bit. And so I circle back on this point. If you know that what we're already doing, what works and what doesn't, that can help you narrow in your position and your plan, narrow in on what perhaps is working or what we have not yet tried.
So you're seeing that, seeing what's working or what's not working, and then sort of narrow in on the parts that are working, to take that. But also, then you can not do the things you've already tried that aren't working, but you can try new things too, and kind of focus energy on kind of new solutions instead of the old things that don't work.
Right. But I also wanted to make the point that I don't blame or fault anyone knowing, because the information is so vast and it's spread across so many obscure places that the average person just doesn't read.
Yeah, so you wanted to make it a point that you're not blaming people about this or, judging them. It's just because the information is hard to come across. So you're just it's just more of a technical issue that it's hard to come across, and, you don't want to blame anyone for.
Yeah, and then I'll finally just wrap up with, just as sort of an FYI or interesting thing. These days I find myself more and more, just for fun, kind of digging down into like random government websites. And my apologies to Carolina, this is American specific, but just digging down into these websites at various places, not so much social issues, but things I normally read are like energy and environment related stuff, just because they interest me. It kind of helps you see the structure of like the agencies and how they all exist, and see all the stuff they're doing. They have blogs, they have news sections, they have a lot of interesting stuff. And when you read that, it can kind of help you build a mental map of like, okay, this is where these entities live. Now, which places should we apply pressure to or focus to?
So you're finding yourself looking at these different areas, sort of these different agencies, and then really digging in really deep into it, to the roots, and it gives you sort of a picture, a model of what areas they're working in, and then you're seeing like where you can apply pressure to have an effect within that organization. And so it's kind of a strategy you're kind of working, you've been recently been working on. And
yeah, exactly. That's what I find myself. And it just kind of gives you an idea of like where you might focus or where you can see.
So it sounds like
what's working well.
Yeah. So you want to be effective. It sounds like you're wanting effectiveness. And then this is a way to kind of develop a more effective way of operating and seeing like, where you can be, have the most effect.
Yeah. So that's all. I feel heard. Thank you.
Great. So with that, we'll stop this part. I'm going to